Hey guys, today we're diving into a question that lives quietly inside so many of us, one that hides behind smiles, behind achievements, behind late night scrolling when the room is dark and you're finally alone with your thoughts. It's the question that aches like a bruise you can't see. Why do I always feel like I'm not enough? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're listening from, whether it's 2 a.m. in Manila or a rainy afternoon in London. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk into a room and feel like you need to earn your place before you've even said a word. It starts with a glance. Someone's posture seems more confident than yours, their voice steadier, their shoes cleaner. You notice everything, even the smallest cue that might mean they've got it more together than you do. It's subtle, quiet, automatic. And before you even realize it, a tiny whisper creeps in, "You're not enough." It doesn't shout. It never needs to. It's soft enough to pass for truth. You try to shake it. Maybe if you just finish that task, get through that deadline, fix your skin, lift heavier at the gym, smile more, speak less, learn more, be less. Maybe if you can just manage all of that, you'll finally feel like you belong. Like you're worthy. Like you've arrived. But no matter how much you collect, praise, degrees, compliments, trophies, it slips through your fingers. Like sand. The more you try to grip it, the faster it runs. You walk down the street and notice how people dress. You scroll and see filtered faces, curated lives. You meet someone and feel like a puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit. And it's not because they are judging you, it's because you've already judged yourself before they even had the chance. And maybe it didn't start this way. Maybe once, a long time ago, you ran around with scraped knees and messy hair and didn't think twice about whether you were enough. You just were. You existed. That was enough. Until one day, it wasn't. Maybe someone rolled their eyes when you were too loud. Maybe they said you were too much. Or not enough. Too sensitive. Not tough. Too quiet. Not smart. Not pretty. Not cool. Just a not. And your body remembered that moment. It didn't write it down in a diary, it wrote it in muscle memory. In posture. In tone. In how you clench your jaw or avoid eye contact when you speak your mind. You learned that certain versions of you were rewarded. Others weren't. And you adjusted. You became adaptable. Which was smart. Necessary. You kept yourself safe that way. But in the process, you started to believe the mask was your real face. And now, here you are, years later, looking in the mirror and wondering why you feel hollow. Why compliments don't sink in. Why love feels suspicious. Why your own achievements feel like they belong to someone else. Because somewhere along the way, you decided, if I ever stop proving I'm enough, I might disappear. And so you keep proving. Working. Fixing. Planning. Saying yes. Swallowing no. Until you burn out. But even the burnout doesn't stop you. It just whispers a new lie: you can't afford to rest, you haven't earned it yet. And so the cycle tightens. You try to keep up. With them. With yourself. With a version of you that doesn't even exist, but somehow became the gold standard. And it's not that you want to be perfect. You just don't want to be rejected. You just want to be seen without being exposed. You want love without strings, belonging without performance. But every time you get close, that old fear wakes up again. The whisper says they wouldn't love the real you. So you retreat. Quietly. Gracefully. No one notices. You've gotten good at hiding. It's exhausting. And the worst part is, on the outside, no one knows. You're the dependable one, the achiever, the helper, the funny one, the overthinker, the fixer, the strong one, the one who never asks for help, the one who never says, "I don't think I'm okay." But deep down, the question hums like static. Why am I not enough? And maybe the better question is, where did I learn I wasn't? Because you weren't born thinking that. You weren't born ashamed. That feeling came from somewhere. And it can leave, too. But not by striving harder. Not by becoming someone else. It starts, strangely enough, by sitting still. By listening. By naming the lie for what it is. By slowly, very slowly, rewriting that whisper in your mind. You are not broken for asking this question. You are not weak for feeling like this. You are not alone. You're just tired of performing for your own self-worth. And that is a beautiful place to begin. You close your eyes, but the feeling follows you. It doesn't matter if you are in a crowded subway or curled up alone in bed, the sense that you're not enough walks beside you like a shadow. And shadows, as you're about to realize, have origin stories. Somewhere deep in the timeline of your life, maybe before you could even speak full sentences, something began to form. Not a memory, not yet. Just a sensation, an emotional blueprint. The people who raised you, the places you existed in, the ways you were treated, they all contributed to the architecture of your self-worth before you had the language to even ask what worth meant. It wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was the absence of something. Absence of praise. Absence of reassurance. Of physical touch. Of attention. Of protection. Other times, it was too much criticism, too much yelling, too many expectations. You didn't know how to filter it then. You just absorbed it. Like a sponge. If a caregiver only praised your accomplishments but never your curiosity, you might grow up believing love must be earned. If you were often compared to a sibling or cousin, you might have learned that someone is always better than you. If you were ignored when you cried or told to toughen up, you may have concluded that your feelings are a problem. That you are a problem. You carried that into the classroom, into friendships, into your first crush, into job interviews, into adult relationships. And now, you carry it into your inner monologue, the voice that tells you how to act, how to apologize even when you're not at fault, how to shrink to make space for everyone else. But here's the quiet truth, the voice inside your head might not even be yours. You've heard it so long, it feels natural. But if you listen closely, you might hear echoes of someone else's tone. A parent, a teacher, a relative. That person who never gave you the benefit of the doubt. That adult who only noticed you when you were doing something wrong. That coach who made you feel like your value was tied to your performance. And because you were small and they were big, you believed them. That's how kids survive. They adjust. They absorb. They make sense of the chaos in ways that don't always age well. So here you are, grown, aware, thoughtful. You've outlived those years, but not the message. Now, instead of your parents scolding you, it's you scolding yourself. You beat them to it. It feels safer that way. You tell yourself, I should have known better. I'm being too much again. I always mess this up. I probably made them uncomfortable. I'm sorry for being like this. But none of those sentences were born in you. They were planted, repeated, watered, until they bloomed into beliefs. And beliefs are tricky things, they feel like facts. You might look at other people and think they didn't grow up like this. They seem so confident, so stable. But here's the thing, you can't see their shadow. You don't know what their childhood whispered to them. You just know yours is still whispering. And when those old emotional echoes rise up, especially when you're triggered by rejection or silence or disapproval, they don't just whisper. They scream. Not with words, but in your chest, in the racing of your heart, in the urge to over-explain, in the habit of reading between every line in a text message, in the way your body prepares to be too much again. And you might not even realize you're bracing. But you are. You're bracing for a response that already happened years ago. You're defending yourself against people who aren't even here anymore. That's how powerful early messages are. You internalize them not because you were broken, but because you were trying to survive. To belong. To be loved. And that's not weakness. That's resilience. It takes strength to learn how to be acceptable in a world or a household where you felt like too much or not enough. But now you're starting to wonder what life would be like without carrying all of that. You don't need to resent your past to rewrite your future. You don't need to hate the people who hurt you. But you do need to name what happened. You do need to look at the belief, "I'm not enough," and ask it gently, where did you come from? And sometimes the answers are so old, they don't even come as thoughts. They come as memories. A hallway. A face. A birthday party you weren't invited to. A slammed door. A not now. A you being dramatic. And you realize you've been carrying that moment in your posture ever since. But that moment is over. You're here now. Grown. Awake. And you don't need to keep living like that wound is still fresh. You get to ask questions now. You get to say, maybe I didn't deserve that. You get to say, that wasn't my fault. You get to talk back to the voice that isn't yours. Not by yelling, but by replacing it. Try it. Not perfectly. Not every day. Just once. Whisper something back. What if I am enough, even if I mess up? What if my worth isn't based on how quiet I am? What if the child in me never deserved to be ignored? And then listen. Not for someone else to reply, but for the silence that follows. The stillness. The possibility. That is the beginning of freedom. You wake up and check your phone before your eyes fully adjust to the light. Notifications flicker in the dark, and before you even get out of bed, your brain is already doing something it never stops doing, comparing. Someone just got engaged. Someone else bought a house. A college friend you haven't spoken to in years is on vacation again, turquoise waters, perfect skin, sun-kissed captions. And for a brief moment, without meaning to, you measure your life against theirs. It's automatic. You didn't choose to do it. But your brain is wired to compare, to scan, to assess your place in the social ladder and adjust your self-worth accordingly. It's ancient wiring in a modern world, and it's quietly destroying your peace. Because the scale you use is broken. It's rigged. You compare your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel. Your invisible effort to their visible outcome. Your unfiltered thoughts to their curated snapshots. And somehow, no matter what you're doing, whether you're relaxing, working, cooking, laughing, there's always this tiny internal voice asking, but are you doing enough? Are you keeping up? The comparison doesn't always need Instagram. Sometimes it happens in the grocery store when someone has their life more together. Sometimes it's with co-workers who got the raise, who's more eloquent, who walks into meetings without a trace of doubt. Even your friends, yes, the people you love, you still catch yourself measuring against them. Their progress, their stability, their luck. But here's the problem, comparison never deals in fairness. It doesn't account for the trauma you've survived. The nights you got yourself through alone. The emotional labor you carry daily. It doesn't weigh context. It just measures outcomes and then blames you for not matching them. And it's exhausting. What started as a way to find your footing becomes a trapdoor. A loop you can't escape. No matter what you achieve, someone will always be doing more, sooner, better. You begin to mistrust your own timeline. You look at your path and wonder if it's too slow. You wonder if you made the wrong choices. If you peaked too late. Or never peaked at all. And worse, you start equating value with visibility. If no one sees your progress, did it really happen? If no one claps, did it even count? But your worth is not a leaderboard. You are not in a race. And the moment you forget that, you lose, not because you're behind, but because you've stopped living in your own life. You're living in everyone else's. When you feel like you're not enough, it's often because you're looking at someone else's enough and using it as a mirror. But they weren't built like you. They haven't fought your fights. They didn't wake up with your fears. Their wins don't mean your losses. And yet, comparison makes you forget all of that. It turns your softness into weakness. Your rest into laziness. Your uniqueness into a flaw. All because it doesn't fit the template you've been shown. But that template is a lie. It was built by a culture that profits off your insecurity. One that sells you the illusion of happiness if you just buy this, achieve that, lose this much, earn that much. A world where nothing is ever enough, because if you ever felt like you were enough, you'd stop chasing. You'd stop spending. You'd start living. And maybe that's the real rebellion, to sit with what you have and say, this is enough for today. To breathe without trying to impress. To rest without guilt. To show up without armor. To love your life, even if it's quieter than theirs. That doesn't mean you stop growing. It means you grow on your own terms. Because the truth is, when you chase someone else's life, you abandon your own. You stop noticing your wins. Your tiny victories. The nights you chose healing over habit. The days you got out of bed when it felt impossible. The moments you gave kindness when no one saw. That's the stuff that builds a real life, not followers, not likes, not metrics. And when you shift your attention back to yourself, not selfishly, but honestly, you begin to recover something sacred. A relationship with yourself that isn't filtered through other people's lives. You begin to reclaim your timeline. Maybe your healing took longer than theirs. Maybe you bloomed later. Maybe your milestones are unconventional. But you made it here. And that deserves to be honored, not compared. You're not falling behind. You're becoming who you were always meant to be. And every time you feel that whisper of not enough, you get to pause and ask, compared to what? Compared to whom? Because your soul wasn't built to be ranked. It was built to be lived. And life doesn't grade on a curve. So the next time you scroll and that ache stirs, when the voice says, you should be more like them, try responding with, no. I'm learning to be more like me. Because that's the only comparison that's ever worth making. You're sitting across from someone, maybe a friend, a date, a coworker. They are smiling, talking, laughing. And on the surface, you're doing the same. Nodding at the right times. Smiling when they expect you to. You might even be telling a story. But inside, there's something else happening. You're scanning. Monitoring. Wondering. Do they actually like me? Am I being weird? Should I have said that differently? Did they just glance away because they are bored? The moment becomes less about connection and more about performance. You're not just being, you're managing. Editing. Performing enoughness in real time. That constant self-monitoring, it's not just social anxiety. It's a deep-seated fear of rejection, and it often goes back to one of the oldest truths about being human, the desire to be accepted. As children, acceptance wasn't just emotional. it was survival. If you were seen as good, easy to handle, helpful, pleasant, then you were safer. You got more affection, less punishment, more praise. So you learned to read the room, to adapt, to sense micro-shifts in tone, in body language, in energy. You became fluent in the silent cues that others didn't even realize they were sending. And in doing so, you lost touch with one crucial thing: your own internal signals. Your needs, your wants, your opinions. You started to value yourself based on how others reacted to you. If they smiled, you were okay. If they frowned, you panicked. And that wiring followed you into adulthood, where rejection doesn't look like being sent to your room. It looks like being ghosted, unfollowed, overlooked, excluded from group chats, or getting that cold one-word reply. Even when it's minor, it stings deeper than it should. Because rejection doesn't just hurt in the moment, it confirms an old, invisible fear: maybe I'm just not enough to keep around. And when rejection does hit hard, when someone walks away, or ends things, or criticizes you, it doesn't land on an empty field. It lands on a loaded history. All the past moments you didn't process, all the times you swallowed pain to stay lovable, all the invisible math you've done about your worth. So you make rejection your responsibility. You think, if I had just been a little quieter, if I had texted less, if I didn't bring that up. You rerun the tapes, trying to locate the flaw in your performance. As if being enough means being mistake-free. But connection isn't a performance. At least, real connection isn't. When you're always managing how you're perceived, you're not being loved for who you are, you're being accepted for who you're pretending to be. And that kind of love doesn't satisfy. It keeps you anxious, hungry, always needing reassurance. Because you know the truth: if they only know the edited you, then they're not actually choosing you. They are choosing the mask. So even when you're in a relationship or surrounded by people, you still feel lonely. That's the cost of conditional acceptance. And it's a heavy one. But here's the quiet miracle: you can unlearn it. Slowly, gently. It starts in those moments when you feel that spike of anxiety, when you're about to explain yourself for the third time, or apologize for simply having a need, or stay silent when something hurts you. That moment is your cue. Not to lash out, not to shrink, but to check in. Am I betraying myself to be accepted here? Because if the answer is yes, then this is not acceptance, it's survival. And you're not a child anymore. You don't have to survive love. You get to receive it. That doesn't mean being unfiltered and raw with everyone. It means noticing when you're twisting yourself into someone else's comfort zone and asking whether this space was ever safe for your full self to begin with. It means honoring the you that wants to speak, that wants to say, that hurt me. I felt ignored. I need reassurance. I disagree. It means not viewing rejection as a verdict, but as redirection. If someone doesn't accept you, it doesn't mean you're unworthy. It might just mean they're not your people. And yes, that's easier said than felt. But here's something wild: the more you practice letting people see you, really see you, the more you start to trust that some of them can. And when someone does, when they stay, when they soften, when they hold space, you begin to realize something life-changing. Maybe I never needed to perform to be loved. Maybe I just needed to be in the right room. That realization won't undo all the past pain. It won't erase the memory of those who left when you needed them to stay. But it will begin to loosen the grip of fear that's been guiding your every interaction. It will allow you to stop curating yourself like a brand, to stop managing love like a transaction, to stop believing that your value is conditional. And yes, it might mean losing some people. But the ones who remain, the ones who lean in when you're raw, not just radiant, they are worth the shedding. Because they see your soul, not your script. So next time you're in a room, in a conversation, in a moment, ask yourself gently, am I here? Or is my performance here? And if it's the latter, consider calling yourself back. Because the world doesn't need another perfect act. It needs the real you. You're lying in bed, the day finally behind you. The room is quiet. But your mind, loud, restless. A parade of memories, mistakes, missed chances. You think about that thing you said 5 years ago. That job you didn't take. That risk you were too scared to chase. And again, the same whisper surfaces, why am I like this? Why can't I be more driven, more confident, more successful? That feeling of being fundamentally flawed isn't born overnight. It's something that grows over time. And often, it doesn't begin with failure. It begins with expectation. Maybe you grew up in a household where achievement was survival. Where love came with conditions. Be good and you're safe. Be smart and you're valuable. Be quiet and you're lovable. Your identity wasn't something you discovered, it was something you performed. And the cost? You learn to measure yourself not by who you are, but by who you are supposed to be. So now, even as an adult, you carry that invisible checklist: be productive, be attractive, be emotionally stable, be the fixer, be the strong one, be the funny one, be the one who never needs too much. You might not even realize how often you're shape-shifting. How much energy you spend trying to fit a mold that was never made for you. And when you inevitably fall short of that impossible list, when you're tired, when you mess up, when you're human, you don't just feel disappointment. You feel shame. Because the world didn't teach you that it's okay to be flawed. It taught you that flaw means failure. So you apologize for things that didn't need apologies. You over-explain your emotions. You keep the peace even when you're breaking inside. You do everything you can to stay likable, lovable, enough. But that's the trap. If your worth is tied to how well you perform, then you're never allowed to fall apart. And sometimes you need to. You need to cry, to collapse, to not have it all together. You need to say, I'm overwhelmed, and not have that disqualify your value. But the guilt kicks in, doesn't it? The guilt of resting, of slowing down, of disappointing others. You convince yourself you're lazy if you're not always producing. You judge your healing by how quickly you can return to being useful. That's not self-awareness. That's self-surveillance. You've internalized the gaze of a world that demands your constant perfection. And now, even when no one's watching, you still perform. But what if you didn't? What if being not enough by someone else's standards was actually the beginning of freedom? Think about that. What if all those times you didn't fit in weren't signs of inadequacy, but signs of authenticity? What if the traits you tried to fix were never broken to begin with? Maybe your sensitivity is your compass. Maybe your quiet is sacred. Maybe your overthinking is a sign that you care deeply. Maybe your pauses, your detours, your slow growth, they all belong. You've been told to aim for greatness. But what if the goal wasn't greatness? What if the goal was wholeness? Wholeness means making room for the messy, for the contradictions, for the you who gets it right and the you who stumbles. It means holding space for your humanity, not trying to erase it. And yeah, that sounds nice. But living it, that's hard. Especially when you're surrounded by people who only value the polished version of you. But here's something to consider: if your enoughness depends on perfection, it's not love, it's performance. Real love, whether it comes from others or yourself, doesn't flinch when you unravel. It doesn't retreat when you're unsure. It leans in. It stays. And yes, finding that kind of love, starting with yourself, is a slow burn. It's not a single decision, it's a daily practice. It's choosing, again and again, to be kinder than the voice in your head. To challenge the story that says you're too much and not enough at the same time. It's reminding yourself that worth isn't earned by suffering. You don't have to prove your pain to deserve care. You don't have to be on all the time to matter. Sometimes, being enough means being quiet, being still, being messy, being honest. It means letting go of the performance and stepping into your presence. So when that thought creeps in again, the one that says, you're falling behind, you're not good enough, you're wasting time, pause. Breathe. And ask, whose voice is that? Who told me I had to be perfect to be loved? Because chances are, it's not yours. It's an echo. And echoes don't define you. You do. So tonight, maybe you don't need to change. Maybe you just need to soften. To give yourself permission to exist without fixing. To lay down the armor and say, even here, even now, especially now, I am still worthy. You're walking through your day like everything's fine. Smiling. Nodding. Replying, I'm good when someone asks how you are. You get your tasks done. You laugh when it's expected. You look okay. But something's off and you know it. It's like a hollow echo inside. A quiet sense that no matter what you do or who you do it for, it never really lands. It never fills you. That's the ache of unrecognized effort. Of invisible battles. There's a unique pain in giving your all and still feeling unseen. You try. You show up. You make things easier for others. You go out of your way to be kind, to be reliable, to be present. But when you look around, it's like no one really notices. And worse, when they do notice, it's only when something goes wrong, when you're late, when you drop a ball, when you finally say no. That imbalance builds quietly over time. It's not always dramatic. It's subtle. A text left unread. A moment you needed support and no one asked. A celebration that went ignored. A low moment that went unnoticed. And every time it happens, something shifts. You begin to ask, what more do I have to do to be enough for people? But that question holds a painful assumption that it's your job to earn attention. That your value is something you unlock by doing more, being more, shrinking less, saying yes. So you double down. You become the helper. The fixer. The person who always comes through. You stop asking for anything because somewhere along the way, you decided that needing things made you a burden. That asking for help meant you were weak. So you carry it all in silence and then wonder why you feel so distant from everyone. But let's pause here and ask something important. Where did you learn that love had to be earned? Because it's not something we're born believing. It's something we pick up from places that made us feel like our needs were too much, or our pain was inconvenient, or our voice didn't matter unless it served someone else. So we adapt. We learn to be the strong one. The one who never breaks. The one who's always okay. And the world rewards that. People praise your resilience, your independence, your maturity. But they don't see the cost. They don't see the weight you carry when no one checks in. The nights you stay up overthinking a conversation that barely registered for someone else. The way you beat yourself up for not being on all the time. And the most painful part, you start to believe the silence is your fault. That maybe, if you were more interesting, more successful, more charming, people would care more. You start tying your self-worth to the level of attention you receive. But let's be clear about something. Being unnoticed does not mean being unworthy. Not everyone has the capacity to see your depth. Not everyone is equipped to meet you where you are. And that's not a reflection of your value, it's a reflection of their lens. Still, the emptiness lingers. The longing to be truly known. To be seen without having to shout. to be understood without explaining everything. And that longing, it's not weakness. It's a signal. You're not needy, you're human. We are wired for connection, for witness, for mirrored existence. To be told in some form, I see you. You matter. So what do you do when you feel invisible? You start by seeing yourself. You begin to validate the effort no one else acknowledges. You begin to celebrate the quiet wins. You remind yourself that even when no one claps, you still showed up. Even when no one noticed, you still grew. You begin to speak to yourself the way you wish others would. Not with pity, but with presence. You say, hey, I know you're tired. I know it's been hard. And I see how much you're holding. And slowly, you reframe the silence. Because sometimes, the people who don't see you are simply not your people. And sometimes, the space they leave becomes the room you need to finally hear your own voice. You learn to stop begging for crumbs and start building a table where you're no longer starving for love. A space where your full self is welcome, not just your usefulness. This doesn't mean you give up on connection, it means you raise your standards. It means you stop proving yourself to people who never learned how to receive you. And that's lonely at first. But it's not forever. Because once you begin honoring your own visibility, something changes. You start attracting different energy. People who don't flinch when you're vulnerable. Who don't shrink when you shine. Who don't need you to be perfect to stick around. And yes, that's rare. But it's real. And it starts with how you treat you. So tonight, maybe remind yourself, you don't have to go viral to matter. You don't need applause to be valid. You don't have to be seen by many to be loved deeply. You are not invisible to the things that matter. You are not a ghost in your own story. And even if it feels like no one notices, you're still here. Still trying. Still growing. Still becoming. And that's enough. You're scrolling through your phone. Everyone seems to be doing something. Someone just got promoted. Someone else got engaged. Another person is vacationing in a place you can't even pronounce. Smiles, milestones, perfect filters. Meanwhile, you're sitting on your couch, in your oldest hoodie, wondering why you still feel stuck. That same old thought returns, am I falling behind? But let's unpack that. Falling behind what? Behind who? Behind when? Somewhere along the line, life turned into a race. A timeline. By 25, you should have this. By 30, that. By 35, something else. A checklist passed around like a sacred map. But no one tells you that the map was never made for you. That your terrain is different. That your weather changes. That your pace is your own. And still, the pressure to keep up is constant. So you overthink every decision. Should you move? Should you stay? Should you switch careers? Go back to school? Settle down? Start over? You want to be sure. You want to be right. Because if you're not, it'll mean more proof that you're behind. But here's the truth, comparison is a thief with a megaphone. It drowns out your intuition. It hijacks your self-trust. And it turns your life into a measuring contest you never asked to enter. Because when you compare your chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 20, you lose the plot. You forget the nuances of your own story. The battles you've fought. The resilience that isn't flashy enough for Instagram. The quiet healing. The growth that isn't linear. The mornings you got out of bed even when you didn't want to. That matters. It all matters. But when you live in a culture of constant achievement, stillness looks like failure. Rest looks like laziness. Uncertainty looks like weakness. And so you sprint toward what you're not even sure. Maybe it's approval. Maybe it's safety. Maybe it's the hope that once you arrive, the feelings of inadequacy will disappear. But arrival is a myth. There is no finish line where you finally become enough. Because you were already enough before you even began. So what if, instead of rushing forward, you looked around? What if you honored where you are, not as a temporary embarrassment, but as sacred ground? The waiting season. The rebuilding. The uncertain middle. The awkward pause. These are not delays. They are chapters. And you're allowed to write them without apology. Because here's something people don't talk about: progress is not always visible. Sometimes the biggest steps forward happen underground. In your mindset. In your emotional maturity. In the way you respond differently than you used to. Maybe the win isn't that you got a promotion. Maybe it's that you finally said no. That you didn't betray yourself. That you stopped chasing people who don't value you. Those are victories, too. But the world won't give you a trophy for internal growth. You have to give that to yourself. And yes, it's hard when everyone else seems to be sprinting ahead. It's hard when people ask what you're doing with your life. It's hard when your path doesn't make sense to others. But here's the secret: your timeline is not broken. It's just yours. The detours. They hold depth. The pauses. They offer clarity. The late blooms. They are still beautiful. You are not late. You are not lost. You are not less. You're unfolding. And no amount of pressure, comparison, or artificial timelines can change the value of that unfolding. Still, there are days when the pressure creeps back in. When you feel behind. When you judge yourself for not being further along. In those moments, try this: zoom out. Zoom out from the week. From the month. From the year. Look at your whole arc. Your survival. Your healing. The heartbreaks you carried. The parts of yourself you reclaimed. The identities you outgrew. The self-awareness you built brick by brick. That is a lot. And just because your progress isn't always loud doesn't mean it's not real. So tonight, if you're feeling behind, maybe remind yourself that there is no one-size-fits-all timeline for becoming. You are not a project to complete. You are a person to honor. You are a life in motion, not a statistic in someone else's highlight reel. Let them run. Let them post. Let them chase. You breathe. You ground. You trust that your pace is enough. Because even if no one claps, even if no one sees, even if the world says you should be more by now, you are not falling behind. You are growing in the exact way you're meant to. You're sitting in a room full of people. There's laughter, conversation, the hum of connection. You're part of it, and yet somehow, you still feel like you're on the outside looking in. You smile, nod, maybe even contribute a joke or two. But beneath it all, there's a hollow ache. A sense that you don't quite belong. That if people really knew you, they'd pull away. It's not that you're antisocial. It's not that you don't care. It's that you feel like you're performing your place rather than inhabiting it. Like you're acting out the version of yourself that will be accepted, rather than the version that is honest. And when your presence depends on performance, connection feels more like surveillance than safety. This is the quiet loneliness of self-doubt. It's the kind that doesn't come from being alone, but from not feeling seen when you're with others. Maybe you've spent years trying to be the one who fits in. Who says the right thing, laughs at the right moment, shrinks the parts of yourself that might be too much. You wear different masks in different rooms, and each one chips away at your sense of self. You begin to wonder, if I'm constantly adapting to make others comfortable, who am I when no one's watching? And deeper still, if people like me, but they don't know the real me, does it even count? That's the fear that haunts many who live with this chronic sense of not being enough. You fear that your real self is unworthy. That if you stopped performing, even for a second, everyone would walk away. So you stay on. Polished. Filtered. Tolerable. But all that effort, it leaves you emotionally exhausted. Because even when you're surrounded by people, there's a part of you that feels completely alone. Not because you're unloved, but because you don't feel known. And that disconnection has real weight. It seeps into your self-perception. You start believing that you're hard to love. That your truth is too much. That vulnerability is a risk you can't afford. But here's something to remember: loneliness isn't just the absence of people, it's the absence of authenticity. So how do you begin to bridge that gap? It starts with small moments of truth. Telling someone, actually, I've been struggling. Admitting when you're confused instead of pretending to know. Allowing someone to see your uncertainty without rushing to explain it away. Those moments feel terrifying at first. Like you're peeling away your armor in a storm. But they are also invitations for real connection, for real support, for the kind of relationships that don't require a mask. Because the truth is, not everyone will embrace your whole self. Some people only know how to love a version of you that benefits them. But the people who can hold space for your truth, those are the ones worth finding. Still, building that kind of connection takes time. And in the meantime, the work is to stop abandoning yourself in order to belong. You stop apologizing for your needs. You stop editing your personality to be more digestible. You stop measuring your worth by how comfortable others are around you. And you start asking, what does it look like to belong to myself? That's not an easy question, but it's a necessary one. Because when you start choosing yourself, something begins to shift. The fear of rejection doesn't disappear, but it no longer dictates your every move. You begin to move through the world a little more grounded, a little more honest. And in that honesty, the loneliness starts to loosen its grip. Not because you've filled your life with noise or distraction, but because you've finally made room for your own voice. And that voice, it's soft at first, but it's real. It's the one that says, I don't have to shapeshift to be worthy. I don't have to hide to be accepted. I am not too much. I am not a burden. I am allowed to take up space. Tonight, maybe say that out loud, just to yourself. Even if it feels awkward. Even if no one else hears it. Especially then. Because sometimes what heals you is not being heard by others, but finally hearing yourself. So if you're in a room full of people and still feel alone, don't blame yourself. Don't spiral into the belief that something's broken inside you. It's not. You're just craving something deeper. Something more honest. Something more you. And that craving is not a flaw. It's a compass. Let it guide you. You wake up and the first thing you feel is tension. Not because something's wrong, but because something might go wrong. You scroll your mind like a to-do list. Did I forget something? Did I upset someone? Am I falling behind again? It's like your nervous system is always on high alert, even when nothing's chasing you. That's the quiet burn of internalized pressure. It's the feeling that no matter what you've done, there's still more you should be doing. That if you pause, even for a second, you're letting yourself slip. That if you slow down, the whole world will collapse and it'll be your fault. This isn't just overachieving. This is survival mode disguised as ambition. You tell yourself you're just being responsible, staying ahead, playing it smart. But deep down, the hustle isn't just about success, it's about safety. It's about trying to control how others see you. It's about trying to outrun the fear that you're not good enough unless you're constantly proving it. But what happens when proving becomes the only language you know? You stop allowing rest. You stop accepting compliments. You downplay your wins. You skip over your needs like they are obstacles to productivity. You live in this strange contradiction, always exhausted, always wired. And the most heartbreaking part, even when you do achieve something, it doesn't land. You can't absorb it. You feel the high for a moment, then it fades. The voice in your head returns almost immediately. What's next? What haven't you done? What if it's not enough? This cycle is a trap. Because the truth is, you're chasing a finish line that keeps moving. And with every new goal, the bar raises just enough to stay out of reach. You tell yourself that once you hit the next milestone, you'll finally feel peace. But peace doesn't come from external validation, it comes from feeling safe within yourself. And safety requires permission. Permission to rest, to fail, to not be perfect, to just be without earning your existence. But if you grew up in environments where love was conditional, based on performance, behavior, or achievement, you probably learned early on that your worth was transactional. That being good meant being productive. That being liked meant being useful. That being worthy meant being impressive. So now, as an adult, you carry that same contract with you. Even if no one else is holding the pen anymore, you're still living by the old rules. You might not even realize it. It shows up subtly in the way you can't relax without guilt. In the way you can't say no without over-explaining. In the way you keep fixing things for everyone else while quietly falling apart. And when you feel like you're not doing enough, you spiral into shame. You think, if I'm not constantly improving, what's the point of me? But you are not a project. You are not an endless checklist. You are not a machine. You are a person, a soul, a body that needs sleep, joy, connection, silence. You don't have to earn your breath. So what do you do with all this pressure? You start by noticing it, by naming it, by saying out loud, this pressure isn't truth, it's a pattern, a reflex, a coping mechanism. And then, gently, you begin to interrupt it. Maybe you give yourself permission to stop for 1 hour, 1 afternoon, 1 day. Not to be lazy, not to give up, but to remember that life isn't just about achieving, it's about experiencing. And sometimes, the most radical thing you can do is nothing. Just sit. Just exist. Just be. And yes, your mind will resist. It'll panic. It'll try to convince you that rest is dangerous, that slowing down is risky, that people will stop respecting you if you stop performing. But that voice, it's not your truth. It's your conditioning. And healing means choosing a new voice. One that says, I don't have to be at full speed to matter. I can be soft and still be strong. I can rest and still be valuable. I can just live, and that is enough. Tonight, maybe that's your permission slip. Maybe you stop trying to optimize your every second. Maybe you let go of the productivity apps and performance metrics. Maybe you close your eyes and say to yourself, softly, I'm allowed to be here even when I am not impressive. Because your enoughness isn't based on output. It never was. And the more you believe that, the more space you'll create for joy, for slowness, for wonder, for peace. The kind of peace that doesn't come from finishing something, but from finally realizing you were never behind to begin with. You're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. You should be asleep by now, but your brain has other plans. It's replaying that one awkward conversation from earlier. It's rewriting that message you never sent. It's dragging you into old memories that no longer matter, and yet somehow still do. You keep asking yourself, why can't I just let it go? Because letting go isn't just a choice, it's an unraveling. A releasing of all the thoughts and stories that once kept you safe, even if they hurt you now. That voice in your head, the one that tells you you're not good enough, that you messed up, that people are judging you. It didn't show up out of nowhere. It was shaped by past experiences, by tiny betrayals, by big disappointments, by moments where you learned that shrinking yourself made things easier. For others, at least. And now, even in the quiet, that voice doesn't stop. It fills the silence with self-blame. It turns ordinary moments into proof that something's wrong with you. You misread a text. Proof. You weren't invited. Proof. You forgot something. Proof. But here's the thing, the brain loves patterns. Especially negative ones. Because they give us the illusion of control. If we can anticipate rejection, maybe we won't be hurt by it. If we assume we're not enough, maybe we won't be disappointed when others confirm it. So we armor up. With self-criticism. With overthinking. With perfectionism. It's not random, it's protection. But protection can become a prison. The more you try to control your inner world with fear, the less room there is for compassion. And compassion is what you need to heal. Not constant self-monitoring. Not endless rehearsals of a what if. The problem isn't that you overthink. It's that your overthinking is fueled by a belief that you're inherently flawed. That belief didn't start with you. Maybe it started with a parent who expected too much. A teacher who shamed you. A friend who ghosted you. A partner who made love feel like a transaction. Each of those moments left a mark. And now you carry the echo of those moments in your mind. Not because you're weak, but because you cared. Because you absorbed those experiences like they were mirrors, reflecting who you thought you were. But they weren't mirrors. They were just moments. Flawed, biased, human moments. And you don't have to keep living by their script. So, how do you start letting go? It's not about erasing memories. It's not about pretending everything's fine. It's about telling yourself a new story. One where your past explains you but doesn't define you. One where mistakes aren't shameful, they are human. One where silence doesn't mean rejection. Where a rough day doesn't mean you're a failure. Where feeling sensitive doesn't mean you're broken. You rewrite the story, one line at a time. You notice when you're spiraling, and instead of trying to stop the thought, you soothe it. You say, I see you. I know you're trying to keep me safe. But I don't need this kind of protection anymore. Because what if the voice in your head isn't your enemy, but a younger version of you, still afraid? What if your healing isn't about shutting that voice down, but comforting it? That's where gentleness comes in. That's where the self-compassion begins. It starts small. You mess up, and instead of saying, I'm such an idiot, you say, that was hard, but I'm still learning. You forget something, and instead of spiraling, you say, it's okay. I'm allowed to make mistakes. You feel anxious, and instead of fighting it, you say, this feeling is uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous. These shifts seem subtle, but they're revolutionary. Because every time you respond with kindness, you disrupt the old pattern. You teach your nervous system a new truth, I am not at war with myself. And when that truth begins to settle in, your mind starts to quiet. Not all at once. Not forever. But enough to let peace peek through. Enough to let you breathe. Enough to let you sleep. Tonight, maybe you whispered this to yourself. I am not my thoughts. I am not my fears. I am allowed to release what no longer serves me. Let go of the need to be perfect. Let go of the shame that never belonged to you. Let go of the story that said you had to earn love. Let go, not because the past wasn't real, but because you're finally ready to live something new. You've carried so much for so long. And now, maybe it's time to put it down. You're always waiting for the moment it will feel different. For the day when you wake up and feel whole. For the achievement that finally makes you proud. For the relationship that quiets the inner ache. You tell yourself, once I fix this part of me, I'll feel enough. But the goalpost keeps moving. No matter how much you do, how hard you try, how many people validate you, it never lands. The compliments feel hollow. The victories fade too quickly. You're still left chasing, still left aching, still wondering why the feeling of being enough never seems to arrive. That's because the chase itself is the illusion. We grow up thinking self-worth is something you earn through success, perfection, popularity, usefulness. It's woven into everything we are taught. Gold stars in school, likes on social media, approval from parents. The message is subtle but clear: your value lives outside of you. Go find it. So we do. We overwork, overgive, overperform. We stay in relationships that deplete us, jobs that drain us, cycles that exhaust us, because we think they are the ticket to worthiness. We confuse being liked with being loved. We confuse attention with acceptance. We confuse control with peace. But the deeper truth: you were never meant to chase worth. You were meant to remember it. And remembering is different than achieving. Remembering means peeling back the layers. All the masks, the defenses, the roles you were told to play. It means returning to the version of you that existed before the world told you who to be. That version still lives inside you. The child who played freely, who asked questions without shame, who cried when things hurt and laughed without fear of being too loud. That child didn't wonder if they were enough. They just were. And slowly, that truth was taught out of you. But it can be reclaimed. Not by doing more, but by being more honest. With yourself. About your needs. Your fears. Your wounds. Your softness. Your hunger for connection. Your longing to be seen, truly seen, without needing to earn it. Of course, it feels risky. Especially if your whole identity has been wrapped in performing okayness. If your mask has become your personality. If you've spent so long holding things together that you're terrified of what might fall apart if you let go. But here's the paradox: letting go isn't the end. It's the beginning. When you let go of the chase, you make space to actually feel. Not just the pain, but also the joy. The intimacy. The moments of being fully present without wondering if you're doing it right. You stop outsourcing your worth. You stop waiting for the next big fix. You start anchoring yourself in the truth that was always there: you are worthy just by being alive. That's not a motivational slogan. It's a radical act of reclamation. And yes, some days you'll forget. Some days you'll fall back into the old script. That's okay. Healing isn't linear. What matters is that you come back. Again and again. Come back to yourself. To the breath in your chest. To the quiet voice underneath the noise that whispers, you're okay. You're allowed to be. You don't have to prove anything tonight. Because the world doesn't need a more perfect version of you. It needs the real one. The one who's tired of pretending. The one who's ready to soften. The one who's ready to believe, maybe for the first time, that being imperfect doesn't make you less worthy. It makes you human. So tonight, as you lie there with the lights dimmed and the fan humming gently in the background, say it like a prayer, even if your voice shakes. I don't need to become enough. I already am. Let that truth settle into your bones. You don't have to feel it perfectly for it to be real. You just have to begin. You look around and everyone else seems to have it figured out. They smile with ease. They move through life like they belong. They talk about goals and dreams and relationships with a kind of confidence you can't quite grasp. And you wonder, how do they do it? Why does it seem so easy for them, but so heavy for me? It's like there's a glass wall between you and the rest of the world. You can see connection, joy, ease, but you can't quite touch it. So you ask yourself, quietly, what's wrong with me? But here's the truth most people won't say out loud. Everyone feels this way at some point. Some just get better at hiding it. Some just distract faster. Some drown it out with noise, or with achievement, or with relationships that aren't real but feel safe. That feeling of not being enough doesn't make you broken. It makes you human. It means you're awake, aware, sensitive to the gap between who you are and who you think you're supposed to be. But that supposed to be, it's a mirage, a story, a socially accepted lie we all buy into, that if we just worked harder, looked better, achieved more, we'd finally belong. And yet, real belonging doesn't ask you to change. It invites you to arrive, fully, with all your mess, your confusion, your wonder, your doubt. You've probably spent years editing yourself, holding back your real opinions, laughing when you didn't feel like it, saying yes when your body screamed no, shrinking your needs so you wouldn't be seen as too much. That kind of performance is exhausting and unsustainable. Eventually, the mask starts to crack. And beneath it is the question you've been avoiding: what would happen if I stopped trying so hard to be what everyone else wants me to be? Would people leave? Would everything fall apart? Maybe some things would. But what would remain? What would rise in the quiet space you've never allowed yourself to inhabit? Maybe it would be a real voice. The one you've been silencing for years because it felt too raw, too honest, too different. Maybe it would be friendships that see the whole of you, not just your highlight reel. Maybe it would be the discovery that you are lovable, not because of your image, but despite your fears. To feel like you're not enough doesn't mean you're lacking. It often means you've outgrown a version of yourself that was never yours to begin with. The roles, the expectations, the endless people-pleasing, it worked once. It kept you safe. It helped you survive. But now it's suffocating you. And your soul is asking for something deeper. Not more accolades. Not more likes. But more truth. So you begin by asking, who am I when no one is watching? What do I enjoy, not for the applause, but for the peace? What makes me feel alive, not just accomplished? What kind of people feel like home, not just admiration? These questions aren't easy. They stir up grief. Because as you begin to uncover who you really are, you might have to let go of who you pretended to be. That's the part no one talks about. The grief of you unbecoming. The discomfort of saying, this version of me was necessary once, but it's no longer true. The courage it takes to walk away from approval and into authenticity. But on the other side of that grief, freedom. The freedom to laugh without measuring your tone. The freedom to cry without apologizing. The freedom to exist without needing to impress anyone. That's when the feeling of not enough begins to loosen its grip. Not because you've finally become perfect, but because you've stopped trying to be. You realize, I was never meant to fit in. I was meant to belong to myself. And the more you belong to yourself, the more you attract others who resonate with your truth, not your performance. People who love your silence as much as your sparkle. People who don't need you to shrink or stretch. People who remind you, you are not too much. You are not enough. You are exactly right. You might not have many of those people yet, but you are becoming one of them for yourself. And that's where it all begins. You've spent so much of your life looking outward, watching for reactions, reading the room, measuring your words, calibrating your behavior to be acceptable, agreeable, likable. You've gotten so good at it that sometimes you don't even notice you're doing it. But now, in this quiet moment, you notice. And you ask yourself something you maybe haven't asked before: what if I stopped living to be liked? It's a startling question. One that cuts deep. Because being liked has always felt like the safest thing. Like a shield against projection. Like a shortcut to belonging. Like evidence that maybe, just maybe, you're doing something right. But being liked often comes with a price. Sometimes it means saying yes when you're exhausted. Laughing when you're uncomfortable. Agreeing when you disagree. Silencing yourself to avoid rocking the boat. It's subtle, like a slow erosion. But eventually, your real self becomes a stranger in your own story. That's when the feeling creeps in: I don't know who I am anymore. It's not that you're fake, it's that you've been surviving. Navigating a world that rewards performance and punishes vulnerability. You adapted. You became the version of you that got the least resistance. The least judgment. The most applause. But applause is not connection. Performance is not peace. And the more you center your life around being liked, the more distant you feel from the parts of you that actually matter. So here's the radical invitation: what if you live to be real instead of liked? It doesn't mean becoming rude or reckless. It means becoming true. Speaking with honesty. Holding boundaries that honor your energy. Saying no when you mean no. Asking for what you need, even when your voice shakes. It's scary. Because you will disappoint people. You'll ruffle feathers. You might lose certain relationships that were only sustained by your compliance. But what you lose in comfort, you gain in clarity. You begin to see who actually loves you, not the version you curate, but the you that's raw and messy and unfinished. You begin to feel the ground beneath your feet again. Not shifting to match others, but steady in your own truth. You also begin to trust yourself. Because when you stop editing your feelings to be palatable, you stop questioning if you're too much. When you stop swallowing your needs, you stop resenting others for not guessing them. When you stop pretending to be okay, you give others permission to be human too. This shift, this quiet, powerful reorientation, starts to melt the old belief: I'm not enough. Because you're no longer asking the world to confirm your worth. You're claiming it. Moment by moment. Choice by choice. You start checking in with yourself before checking in with others. You start listening to your body instead of overriding it. You start valuing how you feel over how you appear. And with that comes an unexpected gift: ease. You laugh more freely. You cry without shame. You rest without guilt. You exist without needing to justify your presence. It doesn't mean you never feel insecure again. It doesn't mean you never fall back into old habits. But it means that now you notice. And you return. Return to the self who is whole, even when uncertain. Return to the center that's quiet, even when the world is loud. Return to the knowing that says, I am not here to be perfect. I am here to be real. And being real means you'll be misunderstood sometimes. It means not everyone will approve. But the ones who do, they'll love you with a depth that conditional acceptance could never offer. Because they'll be loving you, not your performance. So tonight, as you lie in the quiet, ask yourself gently, what am I still doing just to be liked? And what would it feel like to let that go? You don't have to know the answer yet. Just be willing to ask. Because the more you ask, the more you unravel the lie that you must be someone else to be enough. You don't. You never did. It hits you at random moments. At the grocery store. In the middle of a conversation. While brushing your teeth. This gentle, persistent thought: am I ever going to feel truly okay? Not just okay on the outside, not just functional, but deeply, quietly okay in your bones. Because even when things are going well, relationships, work, routine, there's a lingering unease. A subtle hum in the background whispering, don't relax too much. Don't let your guard down. You're still not there yet. But where is there? You've tried chasing it in goals, approval, productivity, even self-help routines. You've tried being disciplined, positive, focused, grateful. You've journaled. You've meditated. You've read the right books and followed the right influences and listened to the podcasts that promised peace. Still, something's missing. And here's a truth that most people don't tell you: feeling enough isn't a destination. It's a practice. A slow, often clumsy, deeply human practice of returning, over and over again, to yourself. You don't cross a finish line and suddenly never feel inadequate again. The world doesn't stop demanding things from you. Your past doesn't dissolve. Your brain doesn't rewire itself overnight. The fear of being unlovable doesn't vanish with one breakthrough. But you can learn to stay with yourself when that fear arises. That's the difference. Not eliminating doubt, but learning to hold it without spiraling. Not erasing insecurity, but recognizing it as part of the landscape, not the whole truth. Not fixing every flaw, but softening the voice that says your flaws make you unworthy. This is what emotional maturity looks like. Not perfection, but presence. And sometimes presence means sitting with the part of you that still believes you're not enough. Looking that voice in the eye, not to argue with it, but to say, I hear you. And I'm not abandoning myself tonight. You see, a huge part of healing is simply staying. Staying when you're uncomfortable. Staying when you're unsure. Staying when every instinct wants to escape into distraction or self-blame or self-improvement. You sit in the quiet and you remind yourself, nothing is wrong with me for feeling this way. That's what starts to change you, not forced positivity, not mental gymnastics, but quiet self-honesty. Because once you can sit with the discomfort, it begins to shift on its own. Like fog that slowly clears, not because you chased it away, but because you stopped running from it. You make room for the complexity of who you are, the capable parts, the tender parts, the anxious parts, the hopeful parts. All of it belongs. All of it is part of your enoughness, not an obstacle to it. You stop waiting for the moment when you feel fully healed and start noticing the moments you are present. When your laughter is unguarded. When you set a boundary and breathe easier afterward. When you sit with your sadness without numbing. When you receive a compliment and let it land. These are the signs. Not big epiphanies, but small acts of inner alignment. And the more you notice them, the more you realize, I'm not broken. I'm just learning how to be with myself. And that's where it all begins. You've spent so long looking outside for someone to say it, you're enough. But what if, tonight, that someone is you? Not because you've earned it, but because you're finally ready to believe it's already true. It doesn't matter if you only believe it 2% right now. That 2% is enough to begin. You don't need to fix yourself tonight. You just need to stay with yourself. So take a deep breath. Feel your chest rise and fall. You're alive. You're here. You're trying, and that matters more than you know. No need to strive. Just stay. And here you are. After all the noise, the spirals, the doubts, the rewinding of every moment you thought you weren't good enough, here you are. Still breathing. Still wondering. Still showing up. There's something sacred in that. Something quiet but unbreakable. You've walked 3 years of questioning your worth. You've felt the ache of comparison, the sting of silence when you needed reassurance, the endless internal calculations. Was that too much? Did I sound needy? Should I have said less, smiled more, done better? All those questions trace back to one fear: if they see the real me, they'll walk away. And yet, here's something worth sitting with: what if they don't? What if the version of you that you've buried under layers of perfectionism and people-pleasing is the exact version that someone out there is waiting to meet? What if your realness is someone else's permission to be free? You've likely believed for a long time that if you could just fix yourself, your body, your personality, your habits, then maybe you'd feel like enough. But slowly, you're beginning to understand wholeness isn't about becoming something new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you weren't enough. There was a time, maybe long ago, when you moved through the world without apology. You didn't second-guess your laugh. You didn't shrink your voice. You didn't wear masks just to fit in. You just were. That part of you still exists. It's just been hidden beneath survival. So maybe the question tonight isn't, why do I feel like I'm not enough? Maybe the deeper question is, what am I ready to unlearn? Unlearn that love must be earned. Unlearn that rest equals laziness. Unlearn that confidence is arrogance. Unlearn that softness is weakness. Unlearn the myth that your value depends on your usefulness. Because when you unlearn those things, what's left? You. Not the perfect version. The real one. The one who gets overwhelmed sometimes, but still shows up. The one who doubts herself, but keeps asking hard questions. The one who's been hurt, but still wants to love. You're not here to impress. You're here to exist. To explore. To experience. To stumble and grow and break and mend and keep coming back to yourself. And maybe that's what healing really looks like. Not becoming bulletproof, but becoming soft again on purpose. Letting yourself care. Letting yourself need. Letting yourself receive. Letting yourself rest without guilt. Because the voice that says, I'm not enough, is loudest when you're tired. When you're trying too hard. When you're disconnected from your body and your breath and your actual needs. So tonight, as you lay your head down, let that voice soften. Let the striving pause. Let the inner critic rest too. There's nowhere you need to go. No one you need to become. You are already deeply worthy of being seen, held, and loved just as you are. The world might not tell you that often. But tonight, let this space be the reminder you forgot you needed. You're enough. Not because of anything you did today. Not because of how well you performed. But simply because you are. And now, let's slow everything down together. Let your shoulders relax. Unclench your jaw. Soften your hands. Let them fall gently to your sides or across your chest, wherever they feel safe. Feel the weight of the day begin to dissolve, like dust floating off your skin, leaving behind only warmth. There is nothing left to prove tonight. Nothing left to perfect. You've wandered through big questions. You've held up old beliefs to the light. You've looked gently at the parts of you that are still scared, and you didn't turn away. That's not small work. That's brave work. Let the quiet settle in now. Let your thoughts drift like clouds, nothing to grab, nothing to solve. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're not too late. You're simply here, in this moment, breathing, becoming. And maybe for the first time today, that's enough. So let your breath carry you gently toward rest. Let your body find its rhythm again, slow, soft, steady. You've done enough. You are enough. Close your eyes if they are not already closed. Let the darkness feel like a hug, not an emptiness. You are held. Even now. Especially now. Good night.